Hello, and this is Jonathan McGuinness again from the Questions of Fire podcast. I'm delighted to say that we're into our second quarter of a century of podcasts, 6 months now to celebrate of having driven and interesting people on. Let's take this to a new level now, where there are a lot of changes happening in the world, and I'm coming across more and more dynamic people. Before I get into introduce him, first of all, just let me say who he is and introduce him to us here. Welcome to the show, Benjamin Owen.
How are you doing? Really, really glad to be on, and thank you so much, John. I'm excited to be on the Questions of Fire podcast.
Excellent. Well, let me give you a little bit of background about Ben, about what I know him. He has been a superb athlete in his time, and then he moved into the fitness industry after athletic careers do tend to finish and people need to move on to something else after that. So he went on into helping other people through coaching them in the fitness business and has built his business around that. I've come across him more recently because as I do coach and advise on different people, I'm always interested in how the industry is changing. We have now a new, we say, virtual environment that we're working with. And we have new ways of working online as well as, keeping that intimacy of that change, because people, in order to change, need a lot of trust in the people that they're working with. And Benjamin is setting up something that I think he's going in the right direction with respect to this, with a project called The Awakened Man. So, Benjamin, first of all, I want to say thank you for the work you're doing. I get excited when I see people coming across with new ideas and new approaches. First of all, before we get into where you are with the project of The Awakened Man, please give us, your background. How did you end up here, Ben?
Yeah, thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to tell the story. So yeah, like I was a super successful athlete. Really, I didn't have to try very hard, and I was pretty good, and that was kind of a gift and a curse. So we got to around about 21 and exited the athletic scene, but my massive passion for helping people with their health actually came when I was about 17 years old. My stepdad at the time, he was like, we were massive into, have you heard of trials riding? You ride up sections and through forests. Yeah. So we used to love doing that. He was my, my stepdad was my hero in so many respects. And he helped me just get on the right trail when I was a teenager with too much energy. Anyway, in the January of when I was 17, I think it was 2015, maybe. Sorry, 2005. 2005. He got cancer. Now in the January, he found out he had cancer, and by like the March, he couldn't speak. By the May, he passed away. Now I remember looking down at my stepdad, thinking to myself, like, burpees ain't gonna solve this. He was a very, very active man. He was a mechanic. He was a motorbike rider. He was, he walked every day, but he had some unhealthy habits. And I remember, like, I was doing my personal training badges at the time, thinking there's way more to health than just doing some burpees and doing some running. There is a much, much greater depth to this. And I was very, very lucky in some respects to have had that experience, because then it started me on a path which then separated me from so many personal trainers who think it is all about exercise. I started to uncover not just nutrition, but emotional health, physical health, spiritual health from a very, very early part of my career. And I was went through university. I didn't go to, I didn't give my university my all. I was too busy getting mentored and learning how to run a business by a guy called James Taylor at the time. And James ran a really successful PPA cover business where we went into schools and we teach PE. And so I started teaching loads of kids and fitness and all this sort of stuff. It was really, really cool. But what James did is he mentored me, and I got into this kind of, so he was one of my first proper mentors, really. And when I left, so this was in South Wales now, I left South Wales when I was 21, and I came back up to North Wales, and there was no provision for fitness like I wanted to make it in the north. There was no real personal trainers around. There was no fitness businesses, really. There was maybe a couple, but nothing substantial. It was before the Instagram had really taken off. Before, gyms were a huge, you see multiple gyms in any kind of town or city now. Whereas there was nothing in Llandudno Conway area. So we started a boot camp, and it was just from literally day one, it just skyrocketed. It was really, really successful. I remember the first. This was when Facebook was just like kind of Facebook events were a thing, and I stood in front of, I think it was like 60 people, and having never done a speaking event before in my life. My
Okay.
hands were like this, and I was just like, I just had this real massive burning passion that people needed to have this community thing around fitness. So I launched a boot camp, left my job. I was a lecturer at the time. I didn't really to being a lecturer. Didn't enjoy working in a school environment, in a college environment. It wasn't for me. Too much bureaucracy. And then I started on my own business when I was 22, and that's
Okay.
when Fast Way to Fitness was born. And it kind of, in every single year from there, it's grown year on year on year on year, and now we service 350 clients per day, on a daily
Very
basis, and we help
excellent.
them transform their body. So yeah, my path has always been about building health to build success, and that's kind of what is what's really, really interested me. Now, but that was, one big passion. But what I also realized whilst being a personal trainer is that coaching was also hugely important for people to get long-term change, like
Sure.
transformation coaching, not just being a cheerleader, but actually helping somebody make a huge transformation in their life needed some big shifts. So I started a coaching business when I was like 24, and that was really successful as well. We are, had 10 clients at any one point, and I just really worked on a deep level with them. But I only worked with women, which was really interesting. And observation I had when working with women, especially in the legal industry, barristers,
Yeah.
solicitors, was that vulnerability was weakness. Like showing up and being imperfect was such a weakness in their industry. And I'm like, we were talking before the podcast. John
Yeah.
gave me a gift of some feedback, and it was amazing, really helpful. And I pride myself on how imperfect I am. I take lots of shots. I move quickly, hence fast. Everything's fast. But that's what I was teaching them, is like how to be imperfect, and it actually that helped them create exponential shifts in their lives. Now,
So I have a bit of a question about your own transformation, Ben. You were an athlete. Maybe tell us what sport you did and sort of what level of training you would have done on a daily basis, or even you didn't do. What was your starting point?
Yeah, no, good question. So I was a 400 and 800 meter sprinter.
Yeah.
So that would be, it generally when I was in school and when I was running collegiate athletics, it would be without fail once a day, and sometimes twice a day when I went to collegiate level.
Yeah.
But when I went to college, when I went to university, in UWIC, which is quite a big athletics university, I discovered the gym, and I just loved lifting weights. I really enjoyed it, and I put on a bit too much weight from muscle bulk, and I was like this bulky 400-meter sprinter, look more like a bodybuilder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but yeah, so it was generally really quite high lactic training, painful, daily, and it's not that I wouldn't train. And then this is something looking back on my career, it's not that I overtrained, is I under-recovered. I used to train, and I'd go out and party as well. And that's something I learned with a lot of people in the gym and in work, and is that most of us pay too much attention to how hard we work and not how hard we recover. And so that was really, I'm burnt out really, I think that's the
So one of the things that this, and this is a first impression, Ben, so I'd like your idea. When somebody thinks of an athlete, they think of someone strong mentally, physically. You have to do a lot of things to be in that position. And for you, there was some, natural genetics as well as a training that you did. So an impression of somebody would, they would be quite a strong character. Then you told me, several years later, between 22 and 24, you started off these businesses, particularly coaching with ladies, where you had to be vulnerable yourself in order to work with vulnerable people. So you don't go from a cocky 18-year-old, excuse my expression, and you might not have been, but I'm making,
No, no,
how do you go from a sort of cocky 18-year-old to a 22 or 24-year-old with the maturity? Now, this means things must have happened to develop the maturity to accept vulnerability, to actually show your own vulnerability so people can relate to you and actually want to be coached by you. So for me, there's an interesting gap there in your journey from the athlete who people would perceive as, wow, he's got it together, to somebody who's open enough and mature enough and transparent in such a way that you would tell them your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, so that you would accept their listening, their understanding, and maybe some advice with respect to where to go. How did that happen for you?
I had two very great flatmates. Well, that's the first thing, is that they blunted my cockiness. They just used to point things out to me that was really helpful. Two guys that are both English rugby fans. We used to have such good banter, and they kind of just made me aware of some of these kind of cockiness elements. But there was also, I think it was James that told me once. He goes, "Ben, you're going to go really far in life, but what's going to stop you from going really far is sometimes when you're a bit brash or a bit overbearing." And he said, like, that moment there, that this was about me, and you made it about you. And I remember that moment. I was like, wow, actually, yeah, that was a really helpful thing. And the second thing was, I don't know. I think what it was is that I realized when I started working with Dax, a guy called Dax Moy. Dax is a really good coach. He's a really, really good coach, and it was just about this thing of looking through the eyes of the client and looking and being in their world. And that was my first time of really thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, yeah." And then another thing was is that when I first started my business, before Fast Fitness started, I wanted to have a business called Fitness and Speed Training, where I went and did speed interventions with teams. But what I realized, I just wanted to help people. And what I then realized is I had this elitist mindset, and that wasn't helpful in business, and it wasn't helpful for a personal trainer, because it really didn't help me connect with clients and not judge them. Because what happened was, in the process of becoming a personal trainer, I was working with people who were like 6, 7, 8 stone overweight, and the old Ben, the 18-year-old Ben would say, "Oh, they're lazy, their priorities are in the wrong place," and all this sort of stuff. But actually going spending day in, day out with somebody, look at them pushing themselves really, really hard, you start to think, "Hang on a second, this is not true." Overweight people aren't lazy. Their priorities are their priorities because they just had this is where they are in life. And that was a big thing for me. So the 10 personal training sessions I was doing every single day at the time made me realize that there was way more empathy that I needed in my practice. So yeah, I think it was kind of reps every day doing that.
Yeah,
That
so
makes
like, oh, it does, absolutely, Ben, and like I appreciate that sort of. There is a journey there to be able to come into the coaching world. One of the people I'd say I admire the most is a guy called Peter Crone, and he started off as a fitness guy, and then eventually he ended up training Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, and went around the world with them. And now he calls himself the mind architect. And I was really going to ask you, when you're training someone for fitness, it's not really about the body as such, so that's almost just the excuse to get in the door to help them. Tell us a little bit more about that. Someone comes into a gym, they're expecting to get a routine. Okay, do this many squats, bench presses, or if it's not weights, running, cycling, different types of stretching or whatever. But to change their I don't know what words you use, mindset or identity of who they are. I'm a thin person instead of a fat person. What is it that gives you sort of that leverage generally, and what gives them the ability to go and ask as well? Their point of view is really important. How do those first interactions, when someone comes in with the excuse of wanting to get fitter, turn into a change in their life, Ben, please?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's a really good question. I think the three levers for change are pain, urgency, and desire. That's kind of like an observation. So they may come in, and they are blunting their pain. They're telling themselves a story that it's not as bad as it is, and all this sort of stuff. So pain is a big. So what we sometimes do is we just sit in a conversation and we uncover the pain. Now that's not it, because, like, I've learned in NLP, it's like some things we delete in life, and we delete things, don't we? We
Sure.
delete things to make our life easier. But actually, someone saying, you like, are you really happy with the 5 stone that you've got that's not serving you? And they'll be like, well, no. And I'll ask how it's affecting their life. So the first one is like the pain. So we uncover the pain, and then we find out if urgency is there, because, like, a lot of people, I'll say to them, so, do you want to, are you urgent to lose the weight that you've got? And then they'll say, no, not really. And I was like, okay, so if you're 5 stone overweight still by next Christmas, are you happy with that? And they're like, no, 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 no. Oh, okay, well, let's start to get urgent, because people are not urgent. That's the thing, that especially sometimes, like,
Sure.
so we start to pull the urgency lever. And then finally, what will get them going is the pain and the urgency, but what will keep them going is desire. Now, what we start to do again is, like, future pacing, making sure they're clear on their vision, like we would do in a business, just making this impossible vision and just helping them chunk it down into daily actions. And that's the big thing, I think, that they there's a lot of, and that's again going back to the conversation about shame and regret and all these negative emotions people attach to their past, so that, to make it that they can't achieve that. I'm not worthy
Sure.
of that. I'm not capable of that. Who am I to take this time for myself? So what I realized when I was sitting with person after person after person is that the reason they didn't want to put this big vision out there of what they could be was all
Yeah.
this shame and all these emotions that were just anchoring them to where they wanted to, where they were stuck. So that's kind of where but what I heard, John, this was interesting. I heard this, like, not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough, not. And every single day I'd hear people coming in and saying they weren't X enough. And that's where I found the work of Brené Brown. And I realized it wasn't not enough, not skinny enough, not sexy enough. It was,
Yeah.
I I am not enough. And that was a really powerful part of my coaching career, realizing that to achieve these big things, that people would have to be vulnerable, like put themselves in an arena where they might fail. Like, the gym out there it's a massive room. It's huge. It's like 8,000 square foot open plan. And to put themselves in that arena where they are in front of other people, overweight and might fail, is very, very vulnerable. So that was, yeah, that was big.
And what's probably now, depending on the different circumstances, etc. What's the first path, the first step for somebody to get back on the road of increasing their self worth? I have my own ideas about that, Ben, but I'm curious how you approach. In essence, if somebody has let themselves go in different ways, it could be with their weight, it could be with their relationships, it could be with, how do they regain that self worth and start pulling back in all of that responsibility that they've pushed outwards, or distractions, or overconsumption to numb the pain, whatever it is? What's the very first step, independent of what somebody's going to do, that would allow them? And I'm sure there are many ways, Ben. There's not a
Yeah.
simple answer for this, but how do you work it?
Oh, these are questions of fire. These are really good questions. No, yeah, full disclosure. So if somebody is struggling in the fitness and health arena, one of the things that I think they have to uncover is that to get that self-worth back is, God, look, so, like, if you look at values, like we do a lot of
Yeah.
what Martini's, like, values work is actually like what's really, really important to me. And often I think that people don't value fitness because they've never put a value on it. Now,
Okay.
in my business mind, like that works really well for a higher priced personal training service because what you pay for, you pay attention to, and what you pay attention to, you increase in your values. Now, if you're listening to this, is like if you've been using a pay as you go class, or you've spent like £20 on a gym that you never go to, like you've put a value on your fitness. You put your a value on that. So one of the mechanics of getting someone to value their fitness more is getting them to pay more for it, because that inevitably is going to bump it up in the value ladder. And yeah, that's kind of that's the first step, is like start investing in your fitness, and it will be an investment. I guess that kind of a simple one. Maybe is that oversimplified as an answer, but I
No,
think
I think that's fantastic. And you made me think of another thing, and I'm guessing, just based on what you said, Ben, might be true, is somebody probably just went through a health crisis or a scare. And that might be what has increased their value and why they're there to talk to you in the first place. You know, I'm looking at the other side of the same coin. That could be one of that value for some reason has increased, and that's why they're even there in front of you, or you show them a way to find that value when it's been missing from their psyche, we could say.
yeah, and we sit with clients for up to an hour before they even go to the gym, and we actually just look at how the breadth and the depth of the problem. You know, how much of a problem is their fitness, you know, in their life. So we look at like almost like weeding out the problem, because if you think about it, it's like I'm 2 stone overweight, I'm emotionally bankrupt, I'm tired, I'm burnt out. Where is that? You know, what are the roots of this weed going into in my life, which I never saw? And you know, we've had guys come into the gym and they realized that their business was struggling because their energy was in the basement. And I asked one guy once, I was like, what's this costing you? And he was like, gosh. And he actually worked it out because he went home at 3 o'clock every single day because he was just knackered and he could, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he said, and then he worked with us for a year, and he said he tapped me on the shoulder, and he didn't like the way that I pointed that out in the first session, and I remember he said like, "Okay, I'm going to tell you this, and I don't want to tell you, but," he said, "since I've been at Fast Weight Fitness, I've been working 2.5 hours longer every day, and maybe even more, and we've put around about 150 grand on the business." And he said when I told him that that was a £200,000 problem of him being tired, he disagreed. But then when he went home and thought about it, he was closing more sales in the afternoon because that's when people were like finishing work, ready to buy. And he's like, "Yeah, I never even saw that." And it's really interesting, you know, and that's so it's costing out the problem sometimes.
Well, I think, you know, even just somebody listening to this have actually maybe start to appreciate the value in a way that they hadn't seen it before. Thanks very much for that insight, Ben.
Yeah.
So then when you moved on to, you know, fitness has been and still is a part of what you do. The reason why I got to know you just simply because the name and the title and of a project, the Awakened Man Project. So it made me curious, Ben. I logged into the group. I think you reached out. We had a couple of conversations, etc.
Yeah.
Please tell us about the Awakened Man Project and why are you shifting now? Well, I wouldn't say from, but at least you're doing this in conjunction with the fitness element. But this has a different approach, and I don't want to sort of precursor it. What is Awaken Man Project about, and why are you doing it?
Yeah. So if I'm going to start with the why first. I think is because okay, when I was like, I got married when I was 29, 30, and then I got divorced when I was 31, and there was a lot of struggle in my life in that year that I wasn't, you know, it was coming, it was definitely coming because in my 20s I'd put myself out there, and there was a lot of things that it kind of unhinged me a little bit in terms of stability. I was, you know, all the things that I'd made as success in my life kind of disappeared overnight. My cars went, all the money in my bank account went, and all the, you know, my perfect marriage I had in my head disappeared, and I felt really, really unsteady. Not to the point that I was, you know, nothing really bad happened, but I just felt, oh, just, you know, I was so hard on myself. And what I did is I went into warrior work mode, and I just like worked and worked and worked, just because I just didn't want to feel the feelings that come with divorce and like business change, because we moved into this 10,000 square foot unit. The business was like tanking because we changed the model. It was scary, and I didn't have the support network to deal with that. Anyway, one day, it was about 2 years after, maybe 3 years after I got divorced. I was so tired. I was burnt out. I was flogging myself in the gym, having to be lean, and I was standing with my head against the glass in the shower, and my head was pulsing, and all I could think of was like, "This is not good. This isn't good. I've had this headache now for a couple of weeks, and this isn't a healthy guy." And I went on a men's group, just like I just reached out to a friend of mine, a guy called Craig
Yeah.
White. Craig is a really, really great man. I'd love to introduce you guys as well, John, because he's just a phenomenal guy. He was he worked in World Rugby. I said he's got a men's retreat. Anyway, went on the retreat, had a great experience in doing some men's work. Felt like my life got shook like a snow globe during the retreat, sharing with other men, connecting on a deeper level with other men that I
Yeah.
really enjoyed. And there was loads of things that I realized I hadn't done, like talk about anger, talk about shame, talk about connecting and being a man, my relationship with my dad, all these things that was so powerful for a man to be doing. And afterwards, there was a little bit of a circle afterwards, but it wasn't something I engaged with, and I tried to find an in-person one. So I went to loads of different men's groups. They
Yeah.
were not me. It was quite interesting. I took a few pals to one of them, and it just wasn't the right fit. The guys there weren't in business. We were. It was. You've probably been to events before when you
Sure.
don't feel like that your people, and it wasn't from a judgment perspective. It was just like, yeah,
You weren't.
yeah, I didn't connect with him. Yeah. Anyway, so I was working with Yassine, a guy that I'd followed for about 2-3 years on the internet. He's
Mm-hmm.
incredible man. He's run like huge businesses, had huge successes in his career. Anyway, I reached out to him and asked him in that point, will he help me get my business back on life? I thought he was just
Sure.
helping me with my business, but on the calls when I had a mentoring call with him on a Thursday, a lot of the discussions were about me and like me and my partner and crucial conversations that I needed to have and thinking like a business owner. And that was just transformational. So I worked with him for a year, and then I said to him, "Listen, you see, I've been looking to start I was looking at a men's group and I can't find one." And he said, "Oh, that's funny enough. I started something before. I had I had to take some personal time out. But if you want to start a men's group, let's just start a men's group. Let's do it." And then that's where the Awakened Man came from, and that was it felt like an overnight decision, but it took 6 months for me to make that decision.
So
It's
when did that decision get made then, Ben?
Oh, he offered me to start it in about 6 months, and I was trying to answer this question, John, and this is really pertinent to this group, is what do I want?
Sure.
And I couldn't answer it. He asked me it in a coaching session, and he said, "What the do you want?" And
Yeah, sure.
and I was just like, "What do I want?" And I couldn't answer it. And he said, "Ben, one of the biggest things that you do in life is you're a firefighter. You have problems instead of goals." And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah," and I could see, like, I was, I said I didn't have any goals. What had happened is I'd had goals up until I was 30 and achieved these goals, and then had a really bad experience, and then told myself, "Well, I'm not gonna set any more goals." And that was interesting in itself. But over 6 months, he kept on asking me this question, like, literally every couple of weeks. He'd be like, "You still haven't told me what you want." And I was like, "Oh my." So, got to February this year, and in the quiet of COVID,
Yeah.
I got myself a therapist in the January, had some major breakthroughs from working with a really good therapist, and realized that I wanted to be a coach again, and I wanted to step back into the arena of helping people in the same kind of position as I've been in, and it started around about 6-7 weeks ago. So yeah, that's the story up till it started.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so in essence, now that's where it's at. Here we are now. I know you started up the group. You have several hundred people in it already. You have an open week going on at the moment. What's the vision for the future of it, Ben? And I'm going to put a little bit of a sub question into this. I know recently you've become a dad as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, I'm now the father of 4 kids. They're all quite a little bit older, but that just putting that mental hat on changed my perspective of what I do. So I know your answer is going to be filtered by that, so I just want to explicitly put it in there for people. What's your vision of the future now, Ben, for either the Awakened Man group or how you're going to, we say, serve in your life while you're here?
Great question, John. You actually, yeah, I was really grateful for the call we first had actually, because I got on the, I love, I love connecting with people. I love
Sure.
speaking to people, and I remember just our conversation, and you pointed out in that conversation that I had a ceiling for the revenue for Fast, and I was like, I thought that because my I don't come from wealth, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs or some people that made money, like, huge amounts of
Sure.
money. We just had enough money for food and we played in the woods. That's kind of how my childhood was. And when you pointed out my ceiling, I was like really grateful. And I realized, by the way, this has been percolating for the last week, by the way, John. And
Good.
I've
Good.
since answered that question, and I was like, yeah, actually, I spoke to my financial director today, and he was like, right, okay, this is the vision now. So the vision for the Awakened Man is to first of all just start to work out the best way to serve the men that we've got in the the vision for today is start to have these open weeks, start to just get data, just learn what the process is really about, because we've got this concept, and when the rubber meets the road, as I say, see what actually is going to be the results of the guys that come on it. And the vision is to grow the company slowly, relationship by relationship, and that's kind of what I'm learning more so as I'm working with Yassine and as we're getting into it. I want to have an intimate relationship with the guys that come on. In intimacy being like this, like actually doing the things
Sure.
like this. And like, but for me, that was what I was really looking for in my business, is to have a deep connection with people instead of just having a class full of 30 people that was in and do a workout and go. I wanted to really connect with people. And then, so I'm part of the Quantum Leaps group as well. So the vision for
Okay.
them, for the group, is to do, I think it's randomly 11 million in revenue in the next 3 years, and that was said by Yassine. And the downstream effect of us doing that kind of revenue is that we get to give eyeglasses to, I think it's 500,000 kids in third world countries, and provide
Fantastic.
5 eye care hospitals, because Yassine is a peak performance coach. And what he shared with us when we first came on board at Quantum Leaps, which the Awakened Man belongs to, is that if you have no sight, you have literally, it's so difficult to become a peak performer. And
Hmm.
our programs are all about peak performance, becoming a peak performer. So um yeah,
I'll
that
have to, Ben, I'll have to give an exception to that. I was taught the piano accordion as a kid, and I was in All Ireland champions and everything. And my teacher was an All Ireland champion for years in a row. He was a blind man called John Mitchell, and there'd be 20 of us in the room, and he would say, Jonathan, that was you again making that mistake. So, I still don't underestimate blind people. I do think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic, and I fully believe in it. But there are always exceptions. John used to
oh,
sail from Ireland to Wales every summer blind with a voice compass. So, I just think people can always go past that. But what you're doing, and I think helping, the fact that there's also an altruistic part of what you're doing, that people see that they're not just getting benefit for themselves, but they're also part of what they're doing is contributing to people who aren't in the position to help themselves.
yeah, and that's what yeah, absolutely. Like when I first worked with Yassine, like one of the things about the mentoring that I did with him is that I would put a South African person through university with my money
Brilliant.
that and like that for me was like, oh my gosh, that was I I I'd not given, like to in all transparency, I hadn't given a lot. I'd just taken. And a lot of the things I'm learning at the moment is giving back, and giving more is helping me in business more than ever. So yeah, that's been a big pivot of the last couple of months.
So I'm going to ask you an interesting question because I've become a dad, and I wasn't made out to be a dad because I had a lovely background, loving, but sort of, normal working class. So certain limitations, just as yourself. But what I had to learn during the process was how to become a dad, how to be empathic, how to think that mistakes were okay. And one of the instrumental books in my life was a guy called John Gray. He wrote a book called Children Are From Heaven. He's actually famous for Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. But the book Children from Heaven, I've read it 18 times, Ben. And whenever I stray, my wife goes, "You need a refresher." And what it did in the introduction, what John Gray said is, I have tens of thousands of hours with clients on the far side of the table. And what's really interesting to me, what would be the principles that we would have to treat children with in order for them not to end up on the far side of the table from me as a psychologist? And I'm just, maybe this is you on the beginning of a journey, but I'd love you to keep that in mind, Ben, as you go forward. You're going to learn tremendous amounts of lessons, I think, from what you're about to do. And that can even then be turned into, well, how can we ensure that children or, boys don't end up men in that group for the longer term vision? Because if we want to impact, it's not just for one generation, but we have kids, we're both fathers, we will hopefully have grandkids and going further. And I just like to, put that, we say, seed of thought into your mind for how that future could expand even further going forward, Ben,
Well, honestly, yeah, and like quite pertinent point as well, John, because I mentioned that I got a therapist in January, and like I remember going into the therapy session and saying to the guy, I was like, "Hey, I'm not broken, I'm fine, I don't need fixing, I want to be like A plus." And he kind of, I since asked him about that statement, and he kind of, he goes, "Yeah, a lot of people say that, Ben." It's just like, I'm not broken. And one of the things that having a therapist, like psychotherapist, has done for me, two things which I think are absolutely massive. The first thing is it's taught me how to be a better dad, because there's two things that I wasn't doing. Is I didn't have a great relationship with my own dad. I had a good one. I wanted to have a deeper one, but there were things in the way. And then the second thing is that to how to be a better dad in literally spending time with my daughter, because and there's something that my therapist said. He said, like, you do realize the only time that your daughter can see the love that you've got for her is the time you actually spend in front of her eyes, Ben. And like for me, he was like a active service kind of guy. I was like, yeah, I'll do this business, I'll make this happen, I'll bring some money in for the family, so I'll spend hours in the office. That was my blueprint. I'll serve to love. And that was like a big shift for me. And then literally at the same time, just having more vulnerable conversations with my dad. And this was like from the therapy, and on the Awaken Man on a Friday, we have therapy day. And what it is we start to collectively in a group unpick things around our fathers, fear, masculinity, vulnerability. And what's been like beautiful about the experience for a lot of men is that they've realized that they're not the only one that feels like that. Like, it's not just me that feels like this. Anger, frustration, rage, addictions, distractions, all these sort of things. It's just common. It's something that we tell ourselves that it's bad or imperfect. And then you're in a room and everyone else is saying exactly the same thing, and me too. And you're like, oh, right, okay, maybe it's not just me. And normalizing it helps you deal with it. And I think that's like, so it's not normalizing it and making it okay so it doesn't change. It's like, oh, right, it's not this, specifically flaw that's Ben unique. It's actually unanimous across men, and we are collectively changing that since that session has been, and so they're really, really important. And since I changed the relationship with my dad, I've been better in business as well. And that's another thing as well. And like, coming back to, if you're watching this podcast and are listening in, is that all of the stuff that we've been doing in the Awakened Man for the guys 6 weeks in, we haven't done any sales strategies, we haven't done any marketing strategies, we haven't done any business, specific strategies, but everybody's been performing better. And like, so it's like I don't know about you, John, but I'm I'm literally littered with marketing from success coaches every single day telling me I need a new funnel, or I need a new XYZ, or need this new thing. And
Sure.
what I feel this program does is it settles men down and allows them to trust themselves way, way more.
Oh, fantastic. I like the approach. It's more on a relationship basis than, hit my landing page type thing.
Yeah.
Um, a thought came to me while we're talking, Ben, and we're talking about men, and I think this also applies to women in the sense that, okay, well, this happened to me, and I don't like my father, my mother, or my school, or whatever. That overall, if I take the big picture of that, the macro picture of that, we do have a victim society, and that means things happen to me. And I found a very fantastic, I would say, psychologist called Benjamin Hardy recently, and I've read some of his books like Personality Isn't Permanent, etc. And he said lessons are repeated until they're learned. And he goes through an exercise of, you look at what was bad and sort of what were the impacts, but what are the benefits and who am I now because of it? Because if we did actually go back and do the lessons learned from it, you can look at your past as what happened for me. And my question to you, because you're attacking this question with your group, how do we bring that to a societal level? Now, I know that's a big question. I don't expect an answer, but I actually just want to have the question out there. How do we as a society start to think, okay, well, all of the things happened. They weren't really good or bad, but we choose the meaning out of them. How do we start to turn society to think that they happened for me? They've made me who I am. I can't even ask the questions I'm asking you now if I didn't have all the crap that happened to me, because I've been in the gutter looking at the stars, as Oscar Wilde would say. So I know how it smells, how it feels. And I think that's a really, what you're doing by helping people do that, starting with men, is to change society for us to look as beneficiaries to what's happened to us rather than victims in any way, but have that to be the normal narrative. Now, I don't know, that could be a century's worth of work, Ben, but
Yeah.
that's a big vision type thing based on what you're saying that I like,
I know that's probably helped me with going the question you said before, like what's the big vision for the Awakened Man? I had the same vision for Fast. I wanted to change the face of fitness in Conway, and we were
Yeah.
going to do it one body at a time. And what the kind of constant thing has been is like we wanted to create a safe place for people to come and do fitness, judgment-free zone, no mirrors, no, it's a community feel, it's family gym, there's no bodybuilders, looking in the mirror here, or scary kind of equipment. It's just literally everyone doing the same thing. And that's what we're doing with Awakened Man. We're creating a safe space for men to explore, coaching, mentoring, and therapy, but also themselves. And going back to the vision you described there is actually like the ripple effect. And I think I mentioned it to you, or you pointed it out. The ripple effect is like I affect, or I show up as this guy who's exploring these things and having success through exploring these things, and then I share the message, and then other men start to realize actually I'm beautifully imperfect as well. So I'm going to start showing up in a way that, instead of the victim mentality you shared before, is like I'm going to be the empowered person that really can. And yeah, that's I really didn't see that before. I'd done it in Conway. We have affected Conway's fitness, and now we're trying to, on a global scale, affect men being vulnerable, showing up, being imperfect, being okay about it, and being more of a kind of just a presence in their either immediate community, the family, or the wider community.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you're on a real journey, whether this is like a future mountain climb or a space journey, and you're at the beginning of it, Ben. And I want to wish you good luck with it, and thank you for sort of reaching out to me and connecting to me a couple of weeks ago. And that's how we are slowly getting to know each other. Since you've been through what you've been through, Ben, I do like to ask my guests, because they are driven people. And there are a lot of younger people starting out now. And, everyone's going to make their mistakes. But what piece of advice would you give to the 16-year-old Ben if you met him and you said, okay, Ben, listen to this one thing, if nothing else, as you go through life, what might it be?
Oh, that's really difficult. To actually go into schools. I speak in schools for free, and I'll go in and I was actually asked to give this like for the sixth form talk. What was the one thing you need to do in order to be successful? Oh, that's a really tough question. What would I say to my 16-year-old self? Um, I didn't. I'm not one who's often stumped by a question, and I can't even think. Take your time. Take your time. I think that's my life has been a series of doing things as fast as possible, and it's okay to take your time. Is something that's coming a lot, that's coming up for me a lot in a lot of the things that I do. Is like actually make up my mind slowly and take my time with things because not everything has to be done tomorrow. Um, so
Brilliant,
that's
brilliant.
Yeah, and that's something I'm especially learning with the Awaken Man is to take your time, relationship by relationship, help one person right at a time, and we'll get where we want to get to.
Brilliant. Well, I'd love to just say thanks for your transparency, vulnerability, and honesty during the conversation. That's to be respected. Thank you very much, Ben. Where
Thanks, John.
could people reach out to find you now as they watch this? If they want to get in touch with you for fitness or for the Waken Man or just to connect with you for whatever reason, where would they reach out to, Ben?
Yeah, so I'm a big Facebooker, so Benjamin Owen on Facebook. We've got a big yellow picture. And the Awaken Man project. So come and join the group. It's called the Awaken Man project, and it's a group. And each day that Yassine or I will share a post in there just around the arena of the awakening of a man, like things about our visions of business, whether it's our past, whether it's some stoic philosophy. But we show up in there every single day, and
So, oh
yeah,
yeah,
go on.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
And we've also got Fast Way to Fitness is it's a very it's a very local business. Like we've kept it to serve Conway, and so if someone's in the North Wales area, Conway is the county we're in, and we serve the local county at the moment. We haven't got any online. So we just like a lot of what we've done at Fast Way to Fitness is all about the in-person experience. We have like nights like disco nights and all sorts of stuff. So people can't wait to come to the
Brilliant.
gym. Yeah, and actually, just a little share actually, John. This is really a big shift for me with the fitness business was realizing that I wasn't competing with the guy down the road selling fitness. I'm
Yeah,
complete. I'm competing with Netflix because if someone comes to
sure.
the end of the day and they have to choose, do I go to the gym or do I watch Netflix? If they choose Netflix, I've lost. And the reason they'll choose Netflix is because it's easier, it's more entertaining, and it's like not a big effort. So if I make the gym so exciting to be like to come here, that's why they're going to come down. So that's how I run my business for the last 4 or 5 years. Is like how can I make the experience next level?
Well, all I can say is, as a leaving note, Ben, I look forward to partying one evening with you if you're good at it. So
Yeah,
let's give it a go.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please do.
I'd love to say thank you very much, taking the time out to share your story with people, to share what you're trying to do and what you are doing. Actually, it's fantastic, and best of luck with being a father and with your new business.
Thank you, John.
Take
Absolute
care.
pleasure. Thank you.